He was just a struggling mechanic trying to keep his auto shop open when the scream pierced through the night and flames engulfed the apartment building next door. That moment changed everything. What followed, no one could have predicted. Not the heroism, not the revelation, and certainly not the fact that the elegant woman who owned his mortgage was the mother of the 2 children he carried from the inferno. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The acrid smell of burning rubber cut through the cool autumn air as Mike Reynolds tightened the last lug nut on Mrs. Abernathy's sedan. Sweat beaded along his forehead despite the evening chill, the result of 12 straight hours bent over, engines and crawling beneath undercarriages. His garage, Reynolds Auto Repair, sat nestled between a convenience store and a modest apartment complex on the edge of Mapleton, the kind of neighborhood where Christmas lights stayed up until March. And everyone knew which potholes to avoid. The clock on the wall, advertising a motor oil brand that had gone out of business 5 years ago, read 9:47 p.m. Mike stood, pressing his palms against his lower back, feeling the vertebrae protest after another day of demanding labor. At 38, his body had begun cataloging complaints: sore shoulders, stiff knees, the occasional twinge in his right wrist that the doctor had casually mentioned might be early arthritis. "Dad?" A voice called from the small office tucked into the corner of the garage. "Did you remember to call about the electricity bill?" Mike winced. He hadn't. "I'll handle it tomorrow, buddy," he replied, wiping his hands on a shop rag that had long ago surrendered its original color to grease and grime. Tyler appeared in the doorway, 13 years old, with a serious expression that made him look older. He clutched his math textbook, calculator balanced precariously atop it. His sandy hair needed a trim, falling into eyes that were the mirror image of his father's, steady, observant, carrying a hint of weariness no teenager should possess. "They said they'd cut it off if we don't pay by Friday," Tyler reminded him, his voice careful, measured, like he was the parent speaking to a forgetful child. Mike nodded, shame twisting in his gut. The past due notices had been piling up. Electricity, water, and worst of all, the mortgage. 3 months behind now. The bank, Eastern Regional Finance, had been sending increasingly stern letters, each one thinner than the last, as though the paper itself was losing patience. "I've got that Johnson transmission job coming in tomorrow," Mike said, forcing confidence into his voice. "Big payday. We'll get caught up." Tyler nodded, not quite believing, but wanting to. They'd had this conversation before, variations on a theme of temporary setbacks and imminent turnarounds. Ever since Maria had left 4 years ago to find herself, she'd said, though apparently that journey didn't include their son, Mike had been both mother and father, mechanic and homework helper, provider and nurturer. Most days, he felt like he was failing at all of it. "Finish your homework?" Mike asked, changing the subject. "Almost. Just 3 more algebra problems." "That's my boy, smart as they come." Tyler rolled his eyes but couldn't quite hide his smile. "It's just math, Dad." "Just math," Mike echoed with exaggerated offense. "That's like saying the Grand Canyon is just a hole in the ground." This small ritual of theirs, Mike's excessive pride, Tyler's feigned embarrassment, was one of the few constants they could count on. Even on the worst days, when customers were sparse and bill collectors persistent, they had this. "Go on back to the apartment," Mike said, nodding toward the door that connected the garage to their modest 2-bedroom unit above the convenience store. "I'll lock up and be there in 15. Tyler hesitated. "You said that an hour ago." "I mean it this time," Mike promised, crossing his heart like he used to when Tyler was small. "Scout's honor." "You were never a scout." "Details, details," Mike grinned. 15 minutes, then ice cream?" This earned him a genuine smile. "We're out of ice cream." Then we'll have, let me think. Those stale cookies from Sunday. Appetizing, Tyler deadpanned, but turned toward the apartment door. 15 minutes or I'm starting on them without you. As the door closed behind his son, Mike's smile faded. He moved to his cluttered desk, pulling open the bottom drawer, where he kept the bills. The stack was thicker than it had been last week. He rifled through them until he found the most recent mortgage notice, its threat elegantly veiled in corporate language. Final opportunity to resolve delinquency prior to initiation of foreclosure proceedings. Eastern Regional Finance had purchased his mortgage 6 months ago from his original lender. Since then, the grace periods had shortened, the late fees had increased, and the customer service representatives had grown increasingly distant. The name at the bottom of each letter, Sophia Winters, Senior Loan Officer, had become synonymous with dread in the Reynolds household. Mike had never met Ms. Winters, but he'd constructed an image of her in his mind. Middle-aged, steel-gray hair pulled into a tight bun, reading glasses perched on a hawk-like nose, thin lips perpetually disappointed. The kind of woman who'd never missed a payment on anything in her life and couldn't comprehend those who did. He sighed, tucking the notice back into the drawer. Tomorrow. He'd figure it out tomorrow. Just as he was about to shut off the garage, lights, a sound sliced through the quiet night, a scream, high-pitched and terrified, followed by shouting. Mike froze, head cocked, listening. Then came another sound that sent ice through his veins, the unmistakable roar of fire. He bolted to the garage's side door, yanking it open. The night air hit him along with a wave of heat and the sight that would change everything. The apartment building next door, a 3-story structure housing mostly service workers and their families, was engulfed in flames. Orange and yellow tongues licked up the facade, black smoke billowing into the night sky. Windows on the second floor had already shattered from the heat, and people streamed out of the first-floor exits, some coughing, others crying, a few still in their pajamas. Without thinking, Mike sprinted toward the chaos. A small crowd had gathered on the street, faces illuminated by the hellish glow. Sirens wailed in the distance, but Mapleton's volunteer fire department was at least 10 minutes away. "Is everyone out?" Mike shouted to no one in particular, scanning the crowd for the building manager, Mr. Patel. A woman clutching a cat carrier shook her head frantically. "The Jenkins twins, 3rd floor, apartment 3C. Their babysitter ran out to call for help! They're still up there!" Mike's gaze shot to the 3rd floor. The flames hadn't reached it yet, but smoke poured from the windows. The building's ancient fire escape hung precariously on the opposite side from where he stood, partially detached from the brick facade. "Has anyone gone up for them?" he asked, already knowing the answer from the guilty, frightened faces surrounding him. Without another word, Mike stripped off his oil-stained work shirt, soaked it in a puddle left by the previous day's rain, and wrapped it around his face. The rational part of his brain, the part that reminded him he was a mechanic, not a firefighter, the part that whispered Tyler's name like a plea, was drowned out by the knowledge that somewhere in that building were children the same age his. Son had been when Maria left. He charged through the main entrance, immediately assaulted by heat and darkness. The building's electricity had failed, leaving only the inferno's glow to light his way. The stairwell was hazy with smoke, but still passable. Mike took the steps 2 at a time, his lungs already burning, each breath a struggle through the damp fabric. 2nd floor. The heat intensified, forcing him to crouch lower. A beam cracked ominously somewhere above him. 3rd floor. The smoke was thicker here, reducing visibility to mere feet. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Mike moved along the wall, counting doors. 3A, 3B. "Hello," he called out, voice muffled by the shirt. Anyone here? No response. Just the growl of flames consuming the building beneath him and the distant wail of approaching sirens. 3C! The door was closed but unlocked. Mike burst in, immediately dropping to his hands and knees where the air was marginally clearer. The apartment was small. Living room connected to a kitchenette, 2 doors leading off to what he assumed were a bathroom and bedroom. "Kids! Are you in here? Call out!" he shouted, crawling toward the bedroom. A small whimper answered him, so faint he almost missed it beneath the building's groans of distress. Mike pushed open the bedroom door to find 2 small shapes huddled in the corner furthest from the window, where smoke was seeping in through the closed but not sealed pane. Twins, a boy and girl no older than 5, clutched each other, wide-eyed, with terror. The girl had her arms wrapped protectively around her brother, whose face was buried against her shoulder. "Hey there," Mike said, trying to keep his voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "I'm here to get you out. Are you hurt?" The girl shook her head, dark curls bouncing. "Lily said to stay here. She went to call for help." "That was smart," Mike said, crawling closer. "But now I'm the help and we need to go. What are your names?" "I'm Emma," the girl whispered. "This is Ethan. He's scared of fire." "Me too," Mike admitted, reaching them. "That's why we're going to leave real fast, okay?" A thunderous crack from somewhere below punctuated his words. The building was beginning to surrender to the flames. "I'm going to carry you both," Mike explained, unwrapping the damp shirt from his face and instead using it to cover the twins' heads together, creating a makeshift smoke shield. "Keep your faces under this and close your eyes." Without waiting for a response, Mike gathered a child in each arm. They were lighter than he expected, or perhaps it was just the adrenaline making them seem so. Emma's small arms wrapped around his neck, instantly trusting. Ethan remained rigid with fear. The journey back was a nightmare blur of smoke, heat, and instinct. The stairwell that had been passable minutes before was now alive with flame on the 2nd floor. Mike clutched the children tighter and plunged through, feeling the heat sear his exposed arms. His lungs screamed for clean air. His eyes watered so badly he could barely see. But somehow, guided by desperation and the distant rectangle of the exit, they made it to the ground floor. They burst out of the building just as the first fire truck rounded the corner, its lights painting the scene in pulsating red. Mike stumbled forward, lungs heaving, falling to his knees on the asphalt. Gentle hands immediately took the children from his arms, paramedics who had arrived with the fire department. "You're okay now," he managed to tell the twins before. A coughing fit doubled him over. "You're safe." Emma reached out one small hand to touch his cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice clear despite the chaos surrounding them. The world tilted suddenly, darkness encroaching on Mike's vision. The last thing he registered before consciousness slipped away was a paramedic's voice saying something about smoke inhalation and minor burns, and the strange, dreamlike image of an elegant black car screeching to a halt at the edge of the crowd. When Mike opened his eyes again, the world was white and antiseptic. A hospital room. The steady beep of a heart monitor provided rhythm to his confusion. His arms were bandaged from wrists to elbows, and an oxygen mask covered his face. He reached up to remove it, triggering a starburst of pain across his shoulder. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," came a voice from his left. Tyler, sitting in a vinyl chair pulled close to the bed, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he'd been there all night. "The doctor said you inhaled a lot of smoke." Memory flooded back. The fire, the twins, the desperate escape. Mike's heart rate increased, registering on the monitor. "The kids?" he asked, voice raspy even with the mask. "They're fine," Tyler assured him quickly. "Not even a scratch. The girl, Emma, she keeps asking about you. Their mom has been here too." Mike nodded, relief washing through him. Then his brain caught up with Tyler's words. "Their mom?" "Yeah, she's..." Tyler hesitated, an odd expression crossing his face. She's something else. Before Mike could ask what that meant, the door opened and a nurse bustled in, followed by a woman who stopped Mike's breath more effectively than any smoke had. She was tall and striking, with dark hair pulled back in an elegant knot, revealing a face with high cheekbones and eyes the color of amber. Her clothes, a simple blouse and tailored pants, screamed quiet wealth, the kind that didn't need designer labels to announce itself. She moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the most capable person in any room, but it was the recognition that hit Mike like a physical blow. He knew this woman, not personally, but from the photograph on Eastern Regional. With Nancy's website, the one he'd studied with growing dread each time a new notice arrived. Sophia Winters, senior loan officer, owner of his mortgage, mother of the twins he'd just rescued from a burning building. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, her voice lower than he'd imagined, with a warmth that contradicted the cold, impersonal letters. "I don't know how to begin thanking you for what you did." Mike stared at her, wondering if the smoke had damaged his brain or if this was some elaborate hallucination. He removed the oxygen mask despite the nurse's disapproving click of the tongue. "You're Sophia Winters," he stated, the words feeling surreal on his tongue. Something flickered across her face. Surprise followed by a hint of discomfort. "Yes, though I'm guessing you know me from considerably less pleasant circumstances." Tyler looked between them, confusion evident. "Wait, you two know each other?" "Ms. Winters owns our mortgage," Mike explained, never taking his eyes off. "Her. Or rather, her bank does." The nurse, sensing the sudden tension, murmured something about checking back later and slipped out of the room. "Eastern Regional Finance," Sophia confirmed with a slight nod. "But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because you saved my children's lives last night, Mr. Reynolds. Nothing else matters compared to that." Mike attempted to sit up, wincing as his burned arms protested. Tyler immediately adjusted the bed for him. "The twins are yours," Mike said, still processing. "Emma and Ethan." She nodded, emotion briefly overwhelming her composed exterior. "They were with their regular babysitter. I was at a late meeting in the city. By the time I got the call and drove back..." She trailed off, swallowing hard. "If you hadn't gone in when you did..." The unfinished sentence hung in the air, heavy with implications neither of them wanted to voice. "Anyone would have done the same," Mike said automatically, though they both knew that wasn't true. The crowd outside the burning building had proven as much. "No," Sophia replied firmly. "They wouldn't have, and we both know it." She moved closer to the bed, her perfume, something subtle and expensive, cutting through the hospital's antiseptic smell. "The doctors say you'll make a full recovery, but your arms will need time to heal." Mike hadn't even thought about what that meant. No work, no income, bills already past due. His garage closed indefinitely. As if reading his mind, Sophia continued, "I understand you're a mechanic. You own Reynolds Auto Repair." "That's right," he confirmed, wondering where this was heading. "And I imagine it's difficult to fix cars with burned arms." Mike gave a short, humorless laugh. "You could say that." Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly concerned about the same practical matters that were now flooding Mike's mind. "Then I have a proposition for you, Mr. Reynolds," Sophia said, her professional demeanor returning. "Consider it a thank you, though it could never be enough." "I didn't do it for a reward," Mike began, pride stiffening his spine despite the pain. "I know that," she interrupted gently. "That's precisely why you deserve one." She glanced at Tyler, then back to Mike. "But perhaps we could discuss the details when you're feeling better?" Before Mike could respond, the door burst open and two small whirlwinds rushed in, Emma and Ethan, followed by an exasperated-looking doctor. "I told them 5 minutes only," the doctor said apologetically to Sophia. They've been asking about him all morning." Emma clambered onto the foot of Mike's bed without hesitation, her dark eyes, so like her mother's, studying him intently. "You look better without all the black stuff on your face," she declared. Despite everything, the pain, the confusion, the looming financial disaster, Mike found himself smiling. "That was just engine grease and smoke," he told her. "Not my usual look." Ethan hung back, half hidden behind his mother, but his gaze never left Mike's face. "Thank you for saving us from the fire monster," Emma continued solemnly. "Ethan was really scared, but I wasn't." "You were too scared," Ethan mumbled, breaking his silence. "You were crying." "Was not. Were too." Their bickering so normal and childlike amidst the extraordinary circumstances filled the sterile hospital room with unexpected life. Tyler caught Mike's eye across the bed, his expression softening as he watched the twins. For a moment, Mike glimpsed what his son must have looked like at their age, before responsibilities and his mother's absence had forced him to grow up too quickly. Sophia placed a gentle hand on each twin's shoulder. "Emma, Ethan, remember what we discussed. Mr. Reynolds needs rest to heal. But we brought him something," Emma protested, pulling a folded paper from her pocket. She smoothed it carefully on the bed before presenting it to Mike. "I drew it this morning." The crayon drawing showed 4 figures standing in front of what appeared to be a house. 2 small figures in the middle, one with bouncy curls, one with straight hair, and 2 taller figures on either side. Above them, written in a child's careful lettering, "Thank you for saving us." Something caught in Mike's throat that had nothing to do with smoke inhalation. "It's beautiful," he managed. "Thank you," Emma beamed. Ethan edged closer, finally venturing, "The firefighters said you were really brave." "I was really scared," Mike admitted, holding the boy's gaze. "But sometimes we have to do things even when we're scared." Ethan nodded, absorbing this wisdom. With the seriousness only a 5-year-old could muster, the doctor cleared his throat. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Reynolds truly does need rest now." Sophia nodded, gathering her children. "We'll come back tomorrow," she promised, her eyes meeting. Mike's with an intensity that suggested she had more to say when they were alone. As they turned to leave, Emma darted back to press a small kiss to Mike's cheek. "Get better fast," she instructed. "Mummy says we have a big surprise for you." Mike's gaze shot to Sophia, who gave a small, enigmatic smile. "Children," she sighed, "and their inability to keep secrets." After they'd gone, Tyler returned to his chair beside the bed. "So that's the dragon lady from the bank?" he asked incredulously. "She's not what I expected," Mike finished, staring at the crayon, drawing still resting on his blanket. "She was here all night," Tyler added, "pacing the hallway, talking to doctors. When I got here, she was the one who explained everything that happened." Mike absorbed this information, trying to reconcile the cold, impersonal mortgage notices with the woman he'd just met, a mother who clearly adored her children, who had spent the night anxiously waiting for news of her children's rescuer. "Did she mention anything about a surprise?" Mike asked, remembering Emma's parting words. Tyler shook his head. "No, but..." He hesitated. "But what?" "She asked me a lot of questions about the garage, how long you've owned it, how business has been. I didn't tell her about the bills," he added quickly, "but I think she already knew." Of course she knew, Mike thought. She had their financial history spread across her desk with every late notice she sent. He leaned back against the pillows, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried him through the fire and its aftermath was completely gone, leaving only pain, confusion, and questions that would have to wait for answers. "Get some rest, Dad," Tyler said, standing and adjusting Mike's blanket with awkward tenderness. "I'll be here when you wake up." Mike wanted to tell his son to go home, to get some sleep himself. But the words dissolved. as exhaustion pulled him under. His last conscious thought was of amber eyes and the strange twist of fate that had connected his life with Sophia Winters in the most unexpected way possible. Tomorrow would bring answers, and perhaps more surprises. But for now, knowing the twins were safe, that Tyler was beside him, was enough. Everything else could wait until the smoke cleared. The morning light filtered through the thin hospital curtains, casting elongated shadows across Mike's bed. 3 days had passed since. The fire and the doctors had finally cleared him for discharge. His arms remained bandaged from wrists to elbows, the burns healing but still tender beneath the gauze. Tyler stood by the window, a duffel bag of clean clothes at his feet. The teenager had barely left the hospital, shuttling between school, the garage, and Mike's bedside with a steadfast determination that made Mike's chest ache with both pride and guilt. "Mr. Garcia from next door has been checking on the garage," Tyler reported, scrolling through messages on his phone. "Says everything's locked up tight, but you've got a few customers calling about their cars." Mike winced, not from physical pain, but from the mental calculation of lost income. Even a week away from work meant bills piling higher, customers seeking repairs elsewhere, and the already precarious balance of their finances tipping further into the red. "We'll figure it out," he said, more to himself than to Tyler. It had become his mantra over the past 3 days, repeated silently each time a doctor mentioned follow-up appointments or a nurse brought in prescriptions that his insurance would only partially cover. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. The door opened to reveal Sophia Winters, as elegantly composed as she had been that first night, though the dark circles beneath her eyes suggested she wasn't sleeping well. "Good morning," she said, stepping into the room with a briefcase in hand. She nodded to Tyler. "Hello again, Ms. Winters," Mike acknowledged, suddenly conscious of his hospital gown and 3 days' worth of stubble. He'd imagined their next meeting would happen once he was discharged, on more equal footing. "I heard you're being released today," she continued, setting her briefcase on the visitor's chair. "How are your arms?" "Better. Still can't do much, but the doctors say I should have full mobility back within a couple of weeks." He hesitated, then asked the question that had been circling his mind. "How are Emma and Ethan?" Something in Sophia's expression softened. "They're well. Staying with my sister while their apartment is—" She trailed off, then corrected herself. "While we figure out new living arrangements, the building is a total loss." "I'm sorry," Mike said genuinely. "That's rough." "They kept asking when they could see you again," Sophia added, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips. "Emma's drawn about a dozen more pictures for you." Mike found himself smiling back, despite the awkwardness of their situation. "I'd like to see them again, too." Tyler cleared his throat pointedly. "I'm going to get some coffee," he announced. "Dad, you want anything?" "I'm good, thanks," Mike replied, recognizing his son's transparent attempt to give them privacy. Once Tyler had left, closing the door behind him, Sophia's professional demeanor returned. She opened her briefcase and withdrew a folder. "Mr. Reynolds?" "Mike," he interrupted. "After everything, I think we can skip the formalities." She hesitated, then nodded. "Mike, as I mentioned before, I have a proposition for you." She flipped open the folder. "I've taken the liberty of reviewing your financial situation more thoroughly." Mike stiffened. "You mean my mortgage delinquency?" "That, yes," she acknowledged without apology, "but also your business financials, your credit history, and your property assessment." "That seems beyond the scope of a senior loan officer," Mike observed, an edge creeping into his voice. Sophia met his gaze directly. "I'm not just a loan officer, Mike. I'm the regional director of Eastern Financial and a major shareholder. When I took an interest in your case, no one questioned it." The revelation caught Mike off guard. He'd assumed she was middle management, a cog in the corporate machinery. The reality of her position and the power it entailed shifted his understanding of their dynamic yet again. "So what's this proposition?" he asked, deciding to cut to the chase. Sophia pulled out a document and placed it on the bed tray between them. "I'd like to offer you a fresh start." Mike skimmed the document, his eyes widening as he comprehended what he was reading. It was a mortgage modification agreement, one that would not only bring his account current, but reduce his monthly payments by nearly 40% and extend the term to 30 years. "This would make your payments manageable based on your current income," Sophia explained clinically, as though they were discussing someone else's life. "It would eliminate the threat of foreclosure." Mike looked up from the papers, suspicion replacing surprise. "Why would you do this? Your bank doesn't strike me as the charitable type." Something flashed in Sophia's eyes. Was it respect for his directness? "Eastern Regional isn't in the business of charity, you're right, but I have considerable latitude when it comes to high-potential accounts." "High potential," Mike repeated incredulously. "My garage barely breaks even most months." "Your location is prime real estate for development," Sophia said bluntly. "We've had offers from commercial developers who would pay significantly above market value for that block." The pieces clicked into place. "So you're not foreclosing because you think you can make more money selling to developers later?" Sophia's expression remained neutral. "That would be the bank's perspective, yes. And your perspective?" She closed the folder deliberately. "My perspective is that I owe you a debt I can never fully repay. My children are alive because of you. This," she gestured to the mortgage modification, "is the very least I can do." Mike leaned back against his pillows, mind racing. The offer would solve his most pressing financial problem, but something about it felt uncomfortably like charity, regardless of how Sophia framed it. "And if I refuse?" Sophia looked surprised. "Why would you refuse financial stability?" "Because I don't take handouts," Mike said flatly. "I've worked for everything I have." "This isn't a handout," Sophia countered. "It's a business arrangement that happens to benefit both parties. You get to keep your property, and the bank maintains a performing asset." Before Mike could respond, the door swung open and Tyler returned, balancing 2 coffee cups despite Mike's refusal. He paused, sensing the tension in the room. "Everything okay?" Mike and Sophia held each other's gaze for a moment longer, before Mike turned to his son with a forced smile. "Just discussing some financial matters." Sophia smoothly gathered her papers. "Think about it," she said to Mike, sliding a business card onto the tray. "My direct line is on the back. Call me when you're settled at home." She nodded politely to Tyler and left, her heels clicking purposefully down the hospital corridor. Tyler set the coffees down and picked up the business card. "What was that about?" Mike sighed, suddenly exhausted despite having done nothing but lie in bed for 3 days. "She offered to modify our mortgage, make it affordable." Tyler's eyes widened. "That's great, right? We wouldn't have to worry about losing the place?" "It's not that simple," Mike began, but realized he couldn't articulate why he found the offer unsettling. Was it pride, fear of being indebted to someone so clearly powerful, or something else entirely? "It sounds pretty simple to me," Tyler persisted. "We need help. She's offering it." "I didn't save those kids to get something in return," Mike said firmly. Tyler's expression softened with understanding. "No one thinks that, Dad. Especially not her. But refusing help when you need it doesn't make you strong, it just makes you stubborn," Mike supplied with a rueful smile. "I was going to say stupid," Tyler shot back, the corner of his mouth quirking up, "but stubborn works too." Mike looked at his son, this remarkable kid who'd grown up too fast, but somehow hadn't grown bitter, and felt a surge of resolve. Whatever his misgivings about Sophia Winters and her offer, the reality was that Tyler deserved stability, security, a home that wasn't constantly on the brink of being taken away. "I'll think about it," Mike promised. The ride home from the hospital was a study in contrasts. Their neighborhood, always modest, seemed shabbier than Mike remembered, perhaps because he was seeing it through new eyes after meeting Sophia Winters and glimpsing her world of polished surfaces and untold privilege. The autumn trees that lined the streets, however, blazed with color more vibrant than he recalled, as though his brush with mortality had somehow heightened his perception of beauty. Tyler drove with careful concentration, having only received his license 6 months earlier. As they approached their block, Mike could see the charred skeleton of the apartment building next door, its blackened windows gaping like empty eye sockets. Yellow caution tape encircled the property, and a security guard stood watch, presumably to prevent looters or curious teenagers from exploring the ruins. His own garage and apartment above it stood untouched, a miracle considering how close the flames had come. The faded sign, Reynolds Auto Repair in chipped blue lettering, hung slightly askew as it had for years. 3 cars sat in the small lot, waiting for repairs that wouldn't happen until Mike's arms healed. Tyler pulled into their designated parking spot and cut the engine. "Home sweet home," he said with forced cheer. Mike nodded, unable to shake the sense that everything familiar had somehow been rendered strange. The smell of smoke still hung in the air, a constant reminder of what had happened and how close they'd all come to a different outcome. Inside, their apartment was exactly as they'd left it the night of the fire. Dishes in the sink, Tyler's. Algebra homework spread across the kitchen table, Mike's work boots kicked off by the door. It felt like stepping into a museum exhibit of their lives, preserved but no longer quite real. Tyler moved efficiently through the space, opening windows, to air out the lingering smell of smoke, gathering laundry, checking the refrigerator for spoiled food. Mike stood in the center of the living room, feeling useless with his bandaged arms. "You should rest," Tyler suggested, gesturing to the worn couch. "Doctor's orders." Mike wanted to protest, to insist he could help, but exhaustion hit him in a sudden wave. The walk from the car to the apartment had drained what little energy he had. "Maybe just for a few minutes," he conceded, lowering himself onto the couch. He must have fallen asleep immediately, because the next thing he knew, the quality of light had changed, the sun now casting long afternoon shadows across the floor. A blanket had been draped over him, and the apartment smelled faintly of tomato, sauce, and garlic. Mike pushed himself up carefully, wincing as the movement pulled at his healing burns. "Tyler?" "In the kitchen," came the reply. Mike found his son stirring a pot of pasta sauce, a cookbook propped open beside him. The sight was so incongruous that Mike paused in the doorway, momentarily confused. "Mrs. Patel brought it over," Tyler explained, nodding to the cookbook. "Said her son found it when they were packing up their things from the damaged section of the convenience store. It was on your Christmas list last year." Mike recognized it now. Simple meals for working parents. A book he'd seen in a shop window and mentally filed away as something that might make their dinner routine less dependent on frozen pizzas and microwave burritos. "That was thoughtful of her," Mike said, genuinely touched. The Patels had been their neighbors and the owners of the convenience store below their apartment for as long as they'd lived there. "Are they okay?" "The store. Water damage on their side, but insurance is covering it," Tyler reported, stirring the sauce. "They're staying with their daughter until repairs are done." Mike nodded, relieved at least one family had emerged relatively unscathed. "And the pasta?" Tyler grinned. "Ms. Winters sent over groceries, a lot of groceries." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Tyler set down the spoon and headed for the door, leaving Mike to process this new information. Sophia had sent groceries. When? How had she even known their address? Stupid question, he corrected himself. She owned their mortgage. Of course, she knew their address. But before he could dwell on it further, the sound of small feet pounding up the stairs followed Tyler's return. Emma and Ethan burst into the kitchen, faces alight with excitement, followed more sedately by their mother. "Mr. Mike," Emma exclaimed, skidding to a halt just short of colliding with his legs. "You're not in the hospital anymore." "We brought cookies," Ethan added solemnly, holding up a cardboard bakery box nearly as big as his torso. "Homemade," Sophia clarified from the doorway, looking slightly out of place in Mike's modest kitchen with its dated appliances and chipped countertops. Today she wore dark jeans and a simple blouse, her hair loose around her shoulders, a deliberate attempt to dress down, Mike suspected, though she still managed to look like she'd stepped out of a high-end catalogue. "You didn't have to do that," Mike said, addressing both the cookies and the groceries Tyler had mentioned. "We wanted to," Sophia replied simply. Her gaze took in the apartment with polite interest, rather than the judgment Mike had half expected. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Mike answered, suddenly conscious of his wrinkled t-shirt and sweatpants, the easiest things for Tyler to help him change into with his injured arms. Still moving slow, but getting there. "Can we see your burns?" Emma asked eagerly, eyeing his bandaged arms. "Are they super gross?" "Emma," Sophia admonished, but Mike chuckled. "They're not too gross yet," he told the little girl, "just red and a bit blistered. The doctor says I'll have some scars, but nothing too dramatic." "Scars are cool," Ethan declared with authority. "Jason at school has one on his knee from falling off his bike, and everyone wants to see it at recess." "Well, I'm not planning to show mine at recess, but thanks for the vote of confidence," Mike replied, earning a small smile from the normally serious boy. The twins, having delivered their cookies, began to explore the apartment with the uninhibited curiosity of young children. Tyler, seeming to sense that the adults might want to talk, offered to show them his video game collection, an invitation that was met with enthusiastic agreement. As the children disappeared into Tyler's room, Sophia moved further into the kitchen, setting her purse on the counter. "I hope we're not intruding," she said. "The twins were insistent on seeing you, and I wanted to check how you were settling in." Mike waved off her concern with his less injured hand. "It's fine. They're good kids." A comfortable silence stretched between them, broken only by the gentle bubbling of Tyler's sauce on the stove. Mike found himself studying Sophia's face, noticing details he'd missed in the hospital. A small scar near her right eyebrow, the faint laugh lines at the corners of her eyes, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when collecting her thoughts. "Have you considered my offer?" she asked finally, her tone carefully neutral. Mike leaned against the counter, grateful for its support. "I have. And I'm still considering," he admitted. "It's a generous offer, but you're not comfortable accepting it," Sophia finished for him. Mike nodded, surprised by her understanding. "What if I proposed an alternative?" she suggested, her amber eyes intent on his face. "I'm listening. I need someone to oversee the renovation of a property I own," Sophia began, choosing her words with care. "It's a historic building downtown that I purchased as an investment, but I haven't had time to manage the restoration properly." Mike raised an eyebrow, unsure where this was heading. "You're skilled with your hands. You understand mechanical systems, and you clearly have a good eye for structural integrity," she continued. "Once your arms heal, you'd be perfect for the job." "I'm a mechanic, not a contractor," Mike pointed out. "The principles aren't so different," Sophia countered. "Diagnosing problems, replacing parts, maintaining systems, and you'd have professional contractors for the specialized work. You'd be my eyes and ears on the ground, making sure the job is done right." Mike considered this. "And the pay?" Enough to cover your mortgage payments comfortably, with additional income for your time, Sophia replied immediately, having clearly anticipated the question. Plus, I'd arrange for a temporary mechanic to keep your garage running while you recover and during the hours you'd be at the renovation site. It was, on the surface, a perfect solution, providing income without charity, preserving his business, and offering a path forward that maintained his dignity. Yet something still nagged at him. "Why are you doing all this?" he asked directly. "The mortgage modification, the groceries, now a job offer. Is it just because I pulled the twins from the fire?" Sophia's composed expression faltered slightly. "Isn't that reason enough? Most people would send a fruit basket and a thank you note," Mike said wryly, "not restructure someone's entire financial situation." She looked away briefly, gathering her thoughts. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, less assured. "2 years ago, I lost my husband in a car accident. It was sudden. The twins were only 3. One minute we were a family planning a vacation to Disney World. The next, I was a single parent, explaining to toddlers why Daddy wasn't coming home." Mike's chest tightened with unexpected empathy. Though their circumstances couldn't have been more different, he recognized the shell-shocked grief she described. "I'm sorry," he said simply. Sophia nodded, accepting his sympathy without dwelling on it. "The point is, I know what it's like to have your life change in an instant, to wonder how you'll hold everything together alone." Her gaze returned to his, direct and unwavering. "When I look at you and Tyler, I see a family that's making it work despite everything. Then you risked everything to save my children without a second thought." She took a breath, seeming to steady herself. "So yes, this is because you saved the twins, but it's also because I recognize what you're going through, and I'm in a position to help, not with charity, but with opportunity." Mike was silent, absorbing her words. There was a rawness to her explanation that felt genuine, far removed from the corporate language of their previous interactions. From Tyler's room came the sound of laughter, Emma's high-pitched giggle, Ethan's more reserved chuckle, and Tyler's deeper tones. The simple joy of children playing, oblivious to the complicated negotiations of the adult world. "I'll take the job," Mike decided, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "But the mortgage modification stays as is, no. Special terms beyond what you'd offer any customer in my situation." Relief and something like respect flickered across Sophia's features. "Agreed." She extended her hand, then smiled ruefully when she realized he couldn't shake properly with his bandaged arms. Instead, they sealed their agreement with a nod, the beginning of an understanding that was neither purely business nor purely personal, but something undefined and full of possibility. The sound of the front door opening interrupted their moment. Heavy footsteps climbed the stairs, followed by a familiar voice calling out, "Hello? Mike, you home, buddy?" Joe Mendez, Mike's oldest friend and occasionally his best customer, appeared in the kitchen doorway, a toolbox in one hand and a pizza box in the other. He stopped short at the sight of Sophia, his eyebrows climbing toward his receding hairline. "Sorry, didn't know you had company," he said, his curious gaze flickering between Mike and Sophia. "Joe, this is Sophia Winters," Mike introduced, suddenly, aware of how the scene might appear to an outsider, the two of them standing close in his kitchen, the unexpected domesticity of the moment. "Ms. Winters, Joe Mendez. He owns the hardware store 3 blocks over." "Pleasure," Joe said, setting down his burdens to offer Sophia a hand. "I've been hearing about Mike's heroics all over town. Sounds like he saved your kids from quite a blaze." "He did," Sophia confirmed, shaking Joe's hand briefly. "We're very grateful." Joe grinned at Mike. "Always playing the hero, this one, even back in high school, jumping into the river to save Jimmy Peterson's dog." Mike groaned. "That was 20 years ago, Joe. Dim And the dog turned out to be a beaver, Joe continued, addressing Sophia with obvious delight. Poor Mike got bitten for his troubles and needed a tetanus shot. To Mike's surprise, Sophia laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound that transformed her face completely. That sounds about right, she said. Emma tells me he promised to teach Ethan to be brave, even when scared. Clearly he's had practice. Joe nodded approvingly. That he has. He gestured to the toolbox. Brought my electrical kit. Thought I'd check your wiring, make sure nothing got damaged from the heat next door. You didn't have to do that. Mike began, but Joe waved him off. Community takes care of its own, he said simply. Besides, gives me a chance to see these famous twins I've been hearing about. As if summoned, the children reappeared, drawn by the sound of new voices and the unmistakable aroma of pizza. Uncle Joe, Tyler greeted warmly. Hey, kiddo, Joe replied, ruffling Tyler's hair affectionately. Brought your favorite double pepperoni with extra cheese. Introductions were made, pizza was distributed, and soon the small apartment was filled with the comfortable chaos of communal dining. They gathered around the kitchen table, Joe regaling the twins with embarrassing stories from Mike's youth, Sophia adding wry commentary, and Tyler occasionally jumping in to defend his father's honor. Mike sat back, observing the unexpected tableau. His modest kitchen had never felt so full of life. Joe, who had stepped in as a surrogate uncle to Tyler after Maria left, seemed to have instantly adopted the twins as well, showing Ethan magic tricks with napkins and promising Emma a tour of his hardware store where all the really cool tools live. And Sophia, she fit into the scene with surprising ease, helping Tyler serve, laughing at Joe's terrible jokes, gently wiping tomato sauce from Ethan's chin. In this setting, away from Eastern Regional's corporate offices and hospital rooms, she was simply a mother enjoying an impromptu dinner with her children. The hard edges of her professional persona had softened, revealing glimpses of a woman who had loved and lost and somehow kept moving forward. As the evening wound down, Joe departed with promises to return the next day to finish his inspection. The twins, full of pizza and stories, began to droop, Ethan actually nodding off against Tyler's shoulder while they watched a YouTube video on Tyler's phone. We should go, Sophia said quietly to Mike as they observed the children from the kitchen doorway. It's past their bedtime and you need rest. Mike nodded, though part of him was reluctant to see the evening end. There was something healing about the simple human connection of sharing a meal, of laughter and stories, and the uncomplicated joy of children. For a few hours, he hadn't thought about his injuries or financial troubles or the uncertainty of the future. As Sophia gathered the twins' belongings, Mike caught Tyler's eye across the room. His son gave him a small, knowing smile, one that contained questions Mike wasn't quite ready to answer, even to himself. Thank you for dinner, Sophia said as they prepared to leave. The sleeping Ethan cradled in her arms while Emma leaned drowsily against her leg. This was nice, Mike supplied when she trailed off. Yes, she agreed, meeting his gaze directly. Unexpectedly nice. The simple admission hung between them, weighted with possibility. I'll call you tomorrow. About the renovation project, she continued, shifting back to practical matters. My assistant will bring over the paperwork. Mike nodded. I'll be here, not going anywhere with these, he added, lifting his bandaged arm slightly. Sophia's expression softened with concern. Are you sure you're managing all right? I could arrange for a home health aide. We're fine, Mike assured her. Tyler's taking good care of me, and apparently half the neighborhood is on a mission to feed us until further notice. All right, she conceded, but the offer stands if you change your mind. She turned to go, then paused. Mike? I'm glad the twins' footprints led to your garage that night. The simple statement, delivered without artifice, caught Mike off guard. Before he could formulate a response, she was guiding Emma down the stairs, Ethan still sound asleep against her shoulder. Mike closed the door and leaned against it, suddenly exhausted but strangely energized at the same time. The apartment felt emptier without the twins' bubbly presence, yet somehow fuller than it had in years. Tyler appeared in the hallway, arms crossed, expression a mixture of curiosity and amusement. "So," he began, drawing out the word, "Ms. Winters, what about her?" Mike asked, aiming for casual and missing by a mile. "Nothing," Tyler said, the hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Just wondering if all near-death experiences lead to job offers and home-cooked meals, or if that's a special perk of saving the right kids." Mike shot his son a warning look, though there was no heat behind it. "It's not like that." "Like what?" Tyler asked innocently. "Like whatever you're thinking," Mike finished lamely. Tyler's expression softened. "Dad, it's okay if it is like that. She seems nice. Different than I expected, but nice." Mike sighed, pushing away from the door to begin the nightly ritual of locking up and turning off lights. "She's a banking executive who happens to own our mortgage and whose kids I happen to save from a fire. That's all." "If you say so," Tyler replied, unconvinced. "But for what it's worth, she looks at you the same way Mrs. Garcia looks at telenovela actors." "Go to bed," Mike ordered, grateful the dim lighting hid the flush he could feel rising in his cheeks. Tyler laughed, heading toward his room. "Just saying, those weren't just thank you for saving my kids looks." As Mike settled into his own bed that night, wincing as his burned arms protested the pressure of the mattress, he found himself replaying the evening in his mind. The easy conversation, the laughter, the moment when Sophia had accidentally brushed his hand while reaching for the salt, and neither of them had pulled away immediately. It was ridiculous, he told himself firmly. They were from different worlds. She probably had an Ivy League education and vacation homes in places he couldn't pronounce. He had a GED, a struggling auto shop, and a mortgage he could barely pay. And yet, there had been moments when none of that seemed to matter, when they were just two single parents sharing a meal, watching their children play, finding common ground in the most unexpected circumstances. Mike's last thought before sleep claimed him was of Sophia's parting words. "I'm glad the twins' footprints led to your garage that night." So was he realized. Despite everything, the pain, the financial stress, the uncertainty, he was genuinely glad their paths had crossed in the crucible of that fiery night. Whatever came next would be complicated, messy, perhaps even impossible. But for the first time in years, Mike Reynolds was looking toward the future with something that felt dangerously like hope. The historic Prescott building stood like a weathered sentinel in downtown Mapleton, its red brick facade darkened with age and neglect. Once the jewel of Main Street, housing the town's first department store in the 1920s, it had fallen into disrepair over decades of changing ownership and economic downturns. Plywood covered most of the ground floor windows, and faded "for lease" signs hung limply in the few that remained intact. Mike Reynolds stood on the sidewalk opposite, studying the structure with the critical eye of someone who understood the difference between cosmetic damage and fundamental flaws. 2 weeks had passed since his discharge from the hospital, and though his arms still bore the angry red marks of healing burns, he'd regained enough mobility to drive and perform basic tasks without assistance. "What do you think?" Sophia asked, standing beside him in a tailored pantsuit that somehow didn't wrinkle despite the humid autumn morning. "Be honest." Mike exhaled slowly. "It's got good bones, but it's been neglected for too long. Water damage in the northeast. Corner. Foundation probably needs work, and I'm guessing the electrical hasn't been updated since the 70s. Sophia nodded, making notes on her tablet. "That matches the initial assessment. What else?" The roof's in rough shape. See those dark patches? He pointed toward the slight dip in the roofline. Water's pooling there, which means structural issues underneath. And those dormer windows on the third floor are probably letting in rain. A small smile played at the corners of Sophia's lips. You have a good eye. At the cars or buildings, it's all about seeing the problems before they become disasters, Mike replied with a shrug, then winced slightly as the movement pulled at his healing skin. Concern flickered across Sophia's face. Are you sure you're ready for this? We could postpone the walkthrough another week. I'm fine, Mike assured her, more brusquely than he'd intended. The truth was, he was tired of sitting at home, unable to work, watching Tyler take on more responsibility than any teenager should. The past 2 weeks had been an exercise in frustration, alleviated only by the twins' frequent visits and the steady stream of casseroles from well-meaning neighbors. Sophia studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. All right, let's go inside. The interior of the Prescott building was a time capsule of architectural trends spanning nearly a century. The grand entrance hall retained hints of its Art Deco splendor beneath layers of dust and decay. Marble floors, bronze light fixtures, ornate plasterwork on the ceiling. Subsequent decades had left their mark in less flattering ways. Dropped. Ceilings from the 60s, wood paneling from the 70s, and garish carpet from the 80s. It's been vacant for almost a decade, Sophia explained, her voice echoing in the empty space. The last tenant was a law firm that occupied the second floor. The top 2 floors haven't been used since the 90s. Mike nodded, mentally cataloguing the issues. Water stains on the walls, cracked plaster, outdated wiring exposed in places where ceiling tiles had fallen away. What's your vision for this place? He asked, running a hand along a mahogany banister that had somehow survived decades of neglect. Sophia's expression softened with genuine enthusiasm. Mixed use, retail on the ground floor, boutiques, a cafe, maybe an art gallery. Professional offices on the second, and the top 2 floors. She hesitated, as though revealing a closely guarded secret. Apartments, affordable housing specifically targeted to families transitioning from difficult situations. Mike glanced at her, surprised by the unexpected social consciousness in her plans. That's not typically what developers do with prime downtown real estate. Something like defensiveness flashed in her amber eyes. I'm not a typical developer. Clearly, Mike agreed, finding himself intrigued by this new facet of Sophia Winters. The banker who sent foreclosure notices and the woman who wanted to create affordable housing seemed like contradictory personas. They continued their tour, moving methodically through each floor. Mike took photos with his phone, made notes, and occasionally tested the structural integrity of suspicious-looking beams or floorboards. Sophia followed, asking intelligent questions and deferring to his judgment with a respect that felt genuinely earned rather than performative. By the time they reached the 4th floor, Mike had developed a mental inventory of the building's most pressing issues. The space here was raw and unrenovated, with exposed brick walls and massive windows that offered sweeping views of Mapleton's modest skyline and the river beyond. This has potential, Mike admitted, moving toward one of the windows. Great natural light, high ceilings. You could create some amazing apartments up here. Sophia came to stand beside him, looking out over the town. That's exactly what I thought the first time I saw it. Most developers wanted to tear it down, build something modern and soulless, but I couldn't bear the thought of losing this piece of Mapleton's history. Mike turned to study her profile, backlit by the afternoon sun. Why did you buy it? It can't have been for the return on investment. She was quiet for a moment, then said, My grandmother lived in this building when she first came to America. 3rd floor, back corner apartment that doesn't exist anymore. She worked as a seamstress in the department store downstairs. The personal connection surprised Mike. He'd assumed the purchase was purely business. She saved every penny, Sophia continued, her voice softening with memory. Put my father through college. He built the financial firm that eventually became part of Eastern Regional. A small, ironic smile touched her lips. Full circle, I suppose. That's not what I expected, Mike admitted. Sophia turned from the window to face him. What did you expect? I don't know. Tax write-offs, corporate image enhancement, not family history. Her expression remained neutral, but something in her eyes suggested his assessment had hit a nerve. Despite what you might think, Mr. Reynolds, not everything I do is motivated by profit margins. The formality of Mr. Reynolds wasn't lost on Mike. They'd stepped back from the comfortable dynamic of their shared pizza dinner to something more guarded. I'm learning that, he acknowledged, softening his tone. And it's still Mike, remember? The tension between them eased slightly. Sophia nodded once, accepting the olive branch. So, Mike, based on what you've seen today, is this project salvageable? It won't be easy, he said honestly, or cheap, but yes, it could be magnificent if done right. That's why I need someone like you overseeing it, Sophia replied. Someone who sees the potential beneath the problems. The simple vote of confidence warmed Mike unexpectedly. For years, he'd been the guy people called when their cars broke down, not someone entrusted with a multi-million-dollar restoration project. I'll need to hire specialists, Mike cautioned. Structural engineers, licensed electricians, plumbers. Already anticipated, Sophia interrupted, pulling out her tablet again. I've set up interviews with 3 engineering firms next week. I'd like you to sit in, help me evaluate their proposals. Mike blinked, momentarily taken aback by her efficiency. You haven't even officially hired me yet. Sophia raised an eyebrow. Haven't I? I thought that was implied when you agreed to the job. We haven't discussed terms, compensation, hours. She pulled a folder from her sleek leather briefcase and handed it to him. Everything's outlined here. Take it home, review it, make any changes you think are necessary. Mike took the folder, acutely aware of the power imbalance between them. She owned his mortgage. She was offering him financial salvation wrapped in the dignity of employment. And yet, standing in this dilapidated building with her, discussing its resurrection, didn't feel like charity or obligation. It felt like collaboration. I will, he promised, tucking the folder under his arm. As they made their way back downstairs, a thought occurred to Mike. How did you know I'd be good at this? Evaluating buildings, I mean. Sophia paused on the second-floor landing, considering. Your garage. The first time I visited, I noticed how you'd reinforced the roof trusses with a custom bracket system. It was elegant, effective engineering from someone who supposedly just fixes cars. Mike stopped, genuinely surprised. You noticed that? I notice everything, Mike, she replied simply, then continued down the stairs. Outside, the afternoon had turned golden, the autumn sun bathing Main Street in warm light. They stood on the sidewalk beside Sophia's luxury sedan, an imported model that probably cost more than Mike's entire garage. Thank you for today, Sophia said, her professional demeanor softening slightly. Your insights were valuable. Happy to help, Mike replied, meaning it. Despite his initial reservations, he'd enjoyed the challenge of assessing the building, imagining its potential, being treated as an expert rather than just a struggling mechanic. Sophia checked her watch, a subtle, expensive timepiece that somehow complemented rather than contradicted her practical nature. I should get going. The twins have their piano lesson at 4. The mention of Emma and Ethan brought a smile to Mike's face. How are they doing? Better, Sophia said, her expression warming. The nightmares are less frequent. Emma's decided she wants to be a firefighter when she grows up. And Ethan, still working through it in his own quiet way, He asks about you, though. They both do. Mike nodded, unexpectedly touched. Tell them I said hi, and that they're welcome to visit the garage any time. Actually, Sophia began, then hesitated. An unusual display of uncertainty from someone who radiated confidence. They've been asking if you and Tyler might join us for dinner this weekend at our house. She added quickly, no pressure, of course. I understand if you're not up for socializing yet. The invitation caught Mike off guard. Their previous interactions had occurred on neutral territory. The hospital, his apartment, now the Prescott building. Stepping into Sophia's personal space felt like crossing an undefined boundary. Your house? He repeated, stalling for time. It's nothing fancy, Sophia said, though something in her expression suggested she knew that was a relative statement. Just a family meal. The twins would love it, and she stopped herself, seeming to reconsider her words. It would be nice to discuss the project in a less formal setting. Mike found himself nodding before he'd fully processed his response. Sure, Tyler would enjoy seeing the kids again. Relief and something like pleasure flickered across Sophia's face. Wonderful. Does Saturday at 6 work? You should be fine, Mike confirmed, mentally reviewing their non-existent weekend plans. I'll text you the address, Sophia said, opening her car door. And Mike, bring your appetite. Emma's insisting on making her special spaghetti, which mostly involves an alarming amount of oregano. The image of the serious little girl earnestly cooking made Mike smile. I'll consider myself warned. As Sophia's car pulled away, Mike stood for a moment longer, looking up at the Prescott building with new eyes. What had initially seemed like an obligation, a job offered out of gratitude or pity, now felt like an opportunity, not just for financial stability, but for something he hadn't allowed himself to consider in years: growth, challenge, and the possibility of building something meaningful. Tyler was waiting when Mike arrived home, sprawled on the couch with his algebra textbook balanced on his knees. He sat up as Mike entered, keen interest evident in his expression. How'd it go? He asked immediately. Is the building as cool as it looks from outside? Mike hung his jacket on the hook by the door, careful not to strain his healing arms. Cooler? 4 stories of history and potential dry rot. Tyler grimaced. That bad? That interesting, Mike corrected, sinking into the armchair opposite his son. It needs a ton of work, but it could be amazing when it's done. So you're taking the job? Mike patted the folder Sophia had given him. Still need to review the details, but probably, yeah. Tyler's face broke into a relieved smile. Good. Does this mean we can finally pay our bills? The question, delivered with his son's characteristic directness, reminded Mike of just how much pressure Tyler had been under. No 13-year-old should have to worry about mortgage payments and utility shutoffs. Yes, Mike confirmed firmly. And before you ask, the terms are fair. It's a real job, not charity. Tyler leaned back, tension visibly leaving his shoulders. I wasn't going to suggest otherwise. Sure you weren't, Mike replied dryly. Anyway, we've been invited to dinner at the Winters house on Saturday. This announcement produced a raised eyebrow from Tyler. Dinner? At their house? Like a date? No, Mike responded too quickly. Not a date. The twins want to see us, both. It's just a casual family dinner. Uh-huh, Tyler said skeptically. That's why your ears are turning red. Mike reflexively touched his ear, then scowled when he realized he'd fallen for his son's teasing. My ears are not red, and even if they were, it would be from standing in the sun all afternoon. Whatever you say, Dad, Tyler replied with exaggerated innocence. So what's their house like? Mansion? Private yacht? Gold toilets? I haven't been there yet, Mike reminded him, but Sophia described it as nothing fancy. Tyler snorted, which means it's probably just a regular mansion, not a super mansion. You're enjoying this way too much, Mike observed. Yep, Tyler agreed cheerfully. It's not every day my dad gets invited to dinner by a beautiful banking executive whose kids he heroically rescued from a burning building. It's like something from a movie." Mike rolled his eyes, though he couldn't entirely suppress a smile. "Has Mrs. Patel been lending you her romance novels again?" "Please," Tyler scoffed. "This is way more interesting than those books. This is real life." The simple observation lingered with Mike long after their conversation had moved on to mundane topics like what to have for dinner and whether Tyler's algebra homework was actually finished or merely almost done. This is real life. Not a movie, not a romance novel, not a fairy tale where the struggling hero is magically rescued by a wealthy benefactor. Real life, with all its complications and contradictions. A woman who sent foreclosure notices and created affordable housing. A mechanic overseeing a historic restoration. Two single parents navigating loss and responsibility. Two children saved from a fire, creating an unexpected connection. None of it fit neatly into any narrative Mike recognized, which perhaps explained his ongoing discomfort with the situation. He was still searching for the catch, the hidden motivation, the moment when the other shoe would drop. Saturday arrived with unseasonable warmth, a last golden day before autumn fully surrendered to approaching winter. Mike stood in front of his closet, frowning at the limited options. Most of his clothes were practical, designed for work in the garage, jeans, t-shirts, the occasional flannel shirt for colder days. Nothing appropriate for dinner at what he suspected, despite Sophia's assurances, would be an impressive home. "Wear the blue button-down," Tyler suggested from the doorway, already dressed in his best jeans and a sweater that had been a Christmas gift from his grandmother last year. "The one Aunt Sarah gave you." Mike located the shirt in question, still, wrapped in plastic from the dry cleaner. He'd worn it exactly once, to a former colleague's wedding 2 years ago. "Isn't this a bit formal for a family dinner?" he asked, holding it up doubtfully. Tyler gave him a look that managed to convey both affection and exasperation. "Dad, she's the regional director of a bank. Her casual is probably our formal." Mike couldn't argue with that logic. He put on the shirt, surprised to find it still fit well, the dark blue bringing out the highlights in his otherwise unremarkable brown hair. Paired with his least worn jeans and the leather shoes he kept. For special occasions he looked presentable, not polished like the men who probably populated Sophia's professional circle, but not embarrassingly disheveled either. Tyler, observing his father's self-inspection in the mirror, offered a thumbs up. "You'll do." "Thanks for the ringing endorsement," Mike replied dryly. They took Mike's truck, recently reclaimed from the garage where it had sat unused during his recovery. The address Sophia had texted led them to the north side of Mapleton, where the town transitioned from modest neighborhoods to more upscale developments near the lake. The Winters' home, when they found it, wasn't the mansion Tyler had jokingly predicted, but it was certainly impressive. A modern craftsman-style house set back from the road, with large windows and a welcoming front porch. The landscaping was tasteful rather than ostentatious, mature trees and native plants rather than manicured lawns. "Told you," Tyler murmured as they walked up the stone path to the front door. "Not fancy at all, just, perfect." Mike shot him a warning look. "Behave yourself." Before they could ring the bell, the door flew open to reveal Emma, her dark curls barely contained by sparkly butterfly clips, wearing what appeared to be a chef's apron several sizes too large for her small frame. "You're here!" she exclaimed, with unrestrained delight. "I made sketty with extra veggies because Mommy says they're important even though they taste like dirt." "Emma," came Sophia's voice from somewhere inside, "what have we discussed about greeting guests?" The little girl's expression turned serious. "Right." She stepped back, executed an exaggerated curtsy, and announced, "Welcome to our humble adobe." Abode, Sophia corrected, appearing behind her daughter. Humble abode. That's what I said, Emma insisted, then grabbed Tyler's hand. Come see my room. I have a chemistry set that makes real explosions. Tyler looked to Mike for permission, clearly torn between adult composure and genuine interest in explosive chemistry sets. Go ahead, Mike chuckled. Just try not to actually blow anything up. As Emma dragged a willing Tyler away, Sophia stepped aside to welcome Mike in. I hope you found the place all right. GPS is a wonderful thing, Mike replied, then immediately felt foolish for stating the obvious. If Sophia noticed his awkwardness, she didn't show it. She was dressed casually in dark jeans and a simple sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. A deliberate informality, Mike suspected, designed to put him at ease. Come in, she invited. Ethan's helping set the table, or at least that was the plan before he got distracted by his new Lego set. The interior of the Winters home was open and airy, with high ceilings, warm wood tones, and comfortable furnishings that managed to be both stylish and inviting. Family photos lined the entryway, the twins at various ages, often with a tall, dark-haired man who must have been their father. Mike found himself studying one picture in particular, where the family of 4 stood on a beach, the twins maybe 3 years old. Everyone smiling into the camera. Daniel, Sophia said quietly, noticing his attention. That was about 6 months before the accident. Mike nodded, not knowing what to say. They stood in silence for a moment, the ghost of Sophia's husband hovering between them. He would have liked you, she said finally, a small, sad smile touching her lips. He was very much a actions speak louder than words person too. Before Mike could respond, Ethan appeared from the dining room, his serious face lighting up when he saw their visitor. Mr. Mike, did you bring your car? He asked eagerly. Mike squatted down to the boy's level, ignoring the slight pull of healing skin on his arms. Not today, buddy, but maybe someday you can come see it at the garage. Ethan nodded solemnly. I'm going to build cars when I grow up. Fast ones. A worthy ambition, Mike approved. I'll have to show you how an engine works sometime. The boy's eyes widened with excitement. Really? Like the inside part? Exactly like the inside part, Mike confirmed. Sophia watched this exchange with a soft expression that Mike couldn't quite interpret. Dinner's almost ready, she said after a moment. Can I get you something to drink first? Wine? Beer? Something stronger if you've been appropriately intimidated by Emma's cooking skills. The gentle teasing surprised a laugh out of Mike. Beer would be great, thanks. She led him through to a spacious kitchen that opened onto a cozy family room. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a backyard with a playset and what appeared to be a vegetable garden gone slightly wild. The garden was Daniel's project, Sophia explained, following his gaze as she retrieved a beer from the refrigerator. I've tried to maintain it, but plants seem to sense my corporate soul and wither accordingly. Mike accepted the beer, oddly touched by her self-deprecation. My mom used to say gardens need conversation as much as water. Apparently, I don't say the right things either, because mine always die too. The admission earned him a genuine smile. Good to know I'm not alone in my botanical failures. A timer dinged, breaking the moment. Sophia turned to the stove, where a pot of pasta bubbled merrily. Would you mind calling the kids? Emma will be devastated if her masterpiece overcooks. Dinner was a lively affair, with Emma proudly serving her spaghetti, which was indeed heavy on the oregano but otherwise edible, Ethan demonstrating his newest Lego creation, and Tyler engaging both twins with easy big brother charm. Sophia, Mike noticed, was different here, more relaxed, quicker to laugh, her professional reserve softened by the warmth of family interaction. So, she said, after the initial flurry of serving and complimenting the chef had settled, have you had a chance to review the project proposal? Mike nodded, wiping a smudge of tomato sauce from his mouth. It's comprehensive. The timeline might be a bit optimistic given the state of the building, but otherwise it looks solid. I assumed you'd say that about the timeline, Sophia admitted with a small smile. I've already built in a 3-month buffer that isn't reflected in the official schedule. Mike raised an eyebrow. Planning for failure? Planning for reality, she corrected. I've never worked on a restoration project that didn't encounter unexpected delays. Better to anticipate them than be surprised. Smart, Mike acknowledged, impressed by her foresight. The conversation shifted naturally between the Prescott building project, the twins' school adventures, and Tyler's interest in engineering, which Mike was surprised to learn Sophia shared. I studied mechanical engineering before switching to finance, she explained, refilling Mike's beer without being asked. The mathematics always came easily to me, but I found I enjoyed the practical applications more than the theoretical. So, what made you switch? Tyler asked, genuinely curious. A shadow passed briefly over Sophia's features. Family expectations. My father had built the business and assumed I would follow in his footsteps. She shrugged lightly. It worked. Out well enough. Mike caught something in her tone, a hint of lingering regret perhaps, or a question never fully resolved. Before he could pursue it, Emma launched into an elaborate story about her class pet, a hamster named Sir Fluffington, who had recently escaped and been discovered inside the principal's desk drawer. As Sophia rose to clear the plates, Mike automatically stood to help, gathering the children's cups and silverware. They moved around each other in the kitchen with unexpected ease, establishing a rhythm of rinsing, loading the dishwasher, and wiping down counters. You don't have to help, Sophia protested mildly. You're a guest. My mother raised me better than to sit while someone else cleans, Mike replied, continuing to rinse plates. Besides, you cooked. Technically, Emma cooked, Sophia pointed out with a smile. I just supervised and prevented a total oregano apocalypse. In the living room, the children had migrated to a board game spread across the coffee table. There, voices rising and falling with the drama of plastic pieces moved across cardboard. They seem to be getting along well, Sophia observed, nodding toward where Tyler was patiently explaining a rule to Ethan while Emma rearranged the game pieces to her satisfaction. Tyler's always been good with younger kids, Mike said, feeling a familiar swell of pride. He's had to grow up fast, but he's kept his patience somehow. Sophia leaned against the counter, studying Mike with those perceptive amber eyes. He reminds me of you. The simple observation warmed him unexpectedly. Best compliment you could give me, he said honestly. What happened with his mother? Sophia asked, her voice gentle. If you don't mind my asking. Mike hesitated. Maria's departure wasn't something he discussed often, not even with close friends like Joe. But standing in Sophia's warm kitchen, the sounds of children's laughter in the background, the question didn't feel intrusive. She left when Tyler was 6, he said finally. Said she wasn't cut out for family life, for responsibility, wanted to find herself. He shrugged, an old hurt dulled by time. Never heard from her again. Sophia's expression held no pity, only understanding. That must have been hard for both of you. Tyler took it harder, Mike admitted. Kept waiting for her to come back. Made me keep the porch light on for months. The memory still had the power to tighten his throat. Eventually, he stopped, asking when she was coming home. Children are resilient, Sophia said quietly, more than we give them credit for, but they shouldn't have to be. The simple statement, delivered without judgment or platitude, made Mike feel truly understood for the first time in years. Not pitied, not admired for doing it all as a single dad, just understood. No, he agreed. They shouldn't. They finished cleaning in companionable silence, interrupted only by occasional shouts of triumph or dismay from the living room as the board game progressed. "Dessert?" Sophia offered, opening the refrigerator to reveal a chocolate cake. "Store-bought, I'm afraid. Baking is yet another domestic skill that eludes me." "Looks perfect," Mike assured her, "and store-bought cake still beats my specialty dessert of whatever cookies are on sale at the gas station." Sophia laughed, the sound unguarded and warm. A culinary masterpiece, I'm sure. As they rejoined the children with plates of cake, Mike found himself observing Sophia in this private setting, away from the corporate office and financial decisions. Here, she was simply a mother who loved her children, who struggled with gardening and baking, who laughed easily and listened intently. The contradictions that had initially confused him, the powerful executive who sent foreclosure notices versus the compassionate woman who created affordable housing, seemed less contradictory now. She was complex, containing multitudes like any person, navigating the sometimes conflicting demands of career and conscience, parenthood and personal history. Mike wasn't sure when exactly the evening shifted from an obligation to a pleasure, but by the time they were preparing to leave, he realized he was genuinely reluctant for it to end. The twins extracted promises of future visits, Ethan securing a firm commitment to explore car engines, and Emma lobbying for a sleepover with Tyler and Mr. Mike too, while Sophia stood back, watching the negotiations with amused tolerance. At the door, as Tyler said his final goodbyes to the twins, Sophia turned to Mike with unexpected seriousness. "Thank you for coming tonight," she said quietly. "It meant a lot to the twins. And to me," she added, almost as an afterthought. Mike found himself wanting to prolong the moment, to say something meaningful rather than polite. It was nice, really nice. The inadequate words nonetheless seemed to please her. "We should do it again sometime, maybe without business discussions next time." The implication that there might be something between them beyond professional collaboration or gratitude hung in the air, unaddressed but not unacknowledged. "I'd like that," Mike said simply. As they drove home through the quiet streets of Mapleton, Tyler was uncharacteristically silent, staring out the passenger window at the passing houses. "Everything okay?" Mike asked, glancing over at his son. Tyler nodded slowly. "Yeah, just thinking. About how different everything is now," Tyler said thoughtfully. 2 weeks ago, we were worried about losing the garage, about bills we couldn't pay. Now you have a new job, and we have. I don't know. Friends?" The question in his voice revealed an uncertainty Mike understood all too well. Their lives had been upended, not in the devastating way they'd feared with foreclosure looming, but upended nonetheless. "I think so," Mike agreed cautiously. "Is that okay with you?" Tyler turned to look at him directly. "Is Sophia more than a friend to you?" The directness of the question caught Mike off guard. "It's complicated," he hedged. "Dad," Tyler said with teenage exasperation, "I'm 13, not 3. I can handle complicated." Mike sighed, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. "The truth is, I don't know what Sophia is to me or what I could be to her. We come from different worlds. She's educated, successful, refined. I'm a mechanic with a GED who can barely keep his business afloat. You're also the guy who ran into a burning building to save her kids," Tyler pointed out. "That counts for something." "It does," Mike acknowledged. "But gratitude isn't the same as..." He trailed off, not sure how to finish the sentence. "As what? Interest? Attraction? Because from where I was sitting, she definitely seems interested." Mike shot his son a surprised look. "When did you become such an expert on women?" "Please," Tyler scoffed. "I've watched every season of The Bachelor with Mrs. Patel. I know the signs." Despite himself, Mike laughed. "I'm not sure reality TV is the best guide for actual relationships." "Maybe not," Tyler conceded. "But I know what I saw. And I saw the way she looks at you when you're not watching." Mike felt a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the truck's heater. "And how's that?" Tyler considered for a moment, then said with simple certainty, "Like someone seeing something they thought was lost." The observation, delivered without drama or exaggeration, struck Mike with unexpected force. He remembered the photograph in Sophia's entryway, her family whole and happy, before loss fractured it. He thought of his own loneliness since Maria left. The years spent focused solely on Tyler and survival, the parts of himself he'd packed away as irrelevant in the face of more pressing concerns. Perhaps that was what had drawn them together, beyond the dramatic circumstances of their meeting. Not just gratitude or attraction, but recognition. Two people who had lost different parts of themselves and were now tentatively rediscovering the possibility of wholeness. "You're pretty. Wise for a kid, you know that," Mike said finally. Tyler grinned. "I get it from my dad." As they pulled into their driveway, the garage and apartment above it looked different somehow. Not smaller or shabbier, in contrast to Sophia's beautiful home, but more like what it truly was. A testament to resilience, to making do with what life offered, to creating a home against the odds. It wasn't perfect. The sign still hung crooked. The paint was still peeling in places. Bills still needed to be paid, and challenges still lay ahead. But for the first time in years, those challenges didn't feel insurmountable. For the first time in years, Mike Reynolds looked toward the future with something that felt not just like hope, but like possibility. The first snow of the season fell in gentle flurries outside the tall windows of the Prescott building. 3 months had passed since Mike had taken on the role of project manager for the renovation, and the once derelict structure was slowly coming back to life. The ground floor had been gutted, revealing the original marble pillars and ornate ceiling, medallions hidden for decades beneath drop ceilings and wood paneling. Scaffolding climbed the exterior brick walls, where masons carefully repointed deteriorated mortar joints and restored damaged cornices. Mike stood in what would eventually become the building's central atrium, reviewing blueprints spread across a makeshift table. Around him, a dozen workers moved with purpose. Electricians pulling new wiring through century-old walls, carpenters reconstructing the grand staircase that had been partially demolished in the 1970s, plumbers installing modern systems in a building designed before indoor plumbing was standard. "The structural engineer has concerns about the east wall," reported Anita Vasquez, the site foreman and Mike's right hand throughout the project. She pointed to a detailed drawing. "Says there's more deterioration than we initially thought. Might need additional reinforcement." Mike frowned, studying the section in question. "That'll push us over budget on that line item." "And add at least 2 weeks to the timeline," Anita added, already anticipating his next concern. Mike rubbed his jaw, feeling the day's stubble beneath his fingers. The burns on his arms had healed weeks ago, leaving faint scars that itched occasionally in the dry winter air. "Let's get a second opinion before we commit to the additional work. Call Rivera. He consulted on that church renovation downtown last year. He might have some less expensive solutions." Anita nodded, making a note on her tablet. "Will do. Also, Ms. Winters called, said she'd be stopping by around 11 to see the progress." Mike checked his watch, 10:45. "Thanks for the warning." "Thought you'd want time to make yourself presentable," Anita replied with a knowing smirk. "Maybe comb your hair, wipe the plaster dust off your face." Mike rolled his eyes, though he reflexively ran a hand through his hair. "Very funny." "Hey, not my business if you want to impress the boss," Anita said, raising her hands in mock surrender. Though if you're trying to play it cool, you might want to tell your face not to light up like a Christmas tree every time she visits. Don't you have some actual work to do? Mike asked pointedly, though without real irritation. Over the past months, he and Anita had developed an easy rapport built on mutual respect and a shared commitment to the project. Always, she sighed dramatically, gathering her tablet. By the way, your son called. Said something about needing a signature for a field trip? Mike nodded. Science Museum next week. I'll call him during lunch. As Anita headed off to supervise the electrical crew, Mike took a moment to survey the space around him. The transformation was already remarkable, though they were still months from completion. Beneath the dust and construction debris, the building's original elegance was re-emerging. High ceilings, graceful archways, expansive windows that filled the space with natural light. The project had become more than just a job for Mike. It had become a passion, a challenge that engaged parts of his mind that had lain dormant during years of focusing solely on car repairs and financial survival. He found himself researching historic preservation techniques in the evenings, studying architectural journals, consulting with specialists about period-appropriate materials and methods. And then there was Sophia. Their professional relationship had evolved into something more complex and undefined over the past months. Weekly project meetings had turned into regular dinners with the children. Professional consultations about budget items had somehow transformed into long conversations about books, politics, and childhood memories. The careful distance they'd initially maintained had gradually eroded, replaced by an easy familiarity that sometimes, in unguarded moments, sparked with something deeper. Yet neither had taken the definitive step to acknowledge what was developing between them. Mike told himself it was because of the professional complications. She was technically his employer, after all. But in honest moments, he admitted the truth. He was afraid. Afraid of misreading signals, afraid of the vast differences in their backgrounds and lifestyles, afraid of disrupting the delicate balance they'd achieved between friendship and possibility. The sound of the temporary door opening pulled Mike from his thoughts. Sophia entered, elegant as always in a camel coat and boots, appropriate for a construction site rather than her usual heels. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she carried a cardboard tray holding 2 coffee cups. "Peace offering," she called, navigating around a pile of lumber to reach him. "I know I wasn't scheduled until tomorrow." Mike accepted the coffee gratefully. "Anita told me you were coming. Problems at the bank?" "No more than usual," Sophia replied, surveying the work around them with evident satisfaction. "I had a meeting cancelled and thought I'd see how things are progressing." She took a sip of her coffee, then added with studied casualness, "And to invite you to a small gathering at my house this weekend." "A gathering?" Mike echoed, instantly wary. "Nothing formal," Sophia assured him quickly. "Just a few friends, some of the investors in this project who are curious about the progress. Emma insisted we needed a winter party since she thinks adults don't celebrate the season properly." Mike smiled at that. Emma's determination to correct what she perceived as adult deficiencies in celebration, imagination, and overall joy was a constant source of amusement. "Sounds like her. She'd be devastated if you and Tyler couldn't come," Sophia continued. "And frankly, I'd be disappointed too. The investors would benefit from hearing directly from the project manager." The professional justification felt like an unnecessary cover, but Mike didn't call her on it. "What time?" "Saturday at 7, nothing fancy," she added, as though anticipating his concern. Though Emma's definition of not fancy includes mandatory hot chocolate with exactly 7 mini marshmallows, so consider yourself warned. 7 specifically. "She's in a phase where 7 is the perfect number," Sophia explained with a fond eye roll. "Don't ask me why. Last month it was 4. Mike laughed, trying to ignore how the simple domesticity of the conversation warmed him. "We'll be there." though I can't promise Tyler won't try to negotiate for extra marshmallows. Emma will respect a good negotiator, Sophia replied with a smile. She comes from a long line of them. They lapsed into a comfortable silence, sipping their coffee and watching the workers move around the space. It struck Mike how natural it felt to stand beside her like this, sharing a quiet moment amidst the controlled chaos of the renovation. "The east wall is giving us some trouble," he said eventually, gesturing toward the blueprints. "More deterioration than we expected. Might push the budget." Sophia moved closer to examine the plans, her shoulder brushing his. "How much? Won't know until we get a second opinion, but potentially 15 to 20,000. She nodded, thoughtfully. "The contingency fund can absorb that, but let me know what Rivera says before we commit." Mike glanced at her, surprised. "How did you know I was going to consult Rivera?" "Because that's what I would do," she replied simply. "He did excellent work on the first Methodist restoration, and he's known for finding creative solutions that don't break the bank." The casual alignment of their thinking shouldn't have felt significant, but somehow it did. Over the months of working together, they'd developed an almost intuitive understanding of each other's approaches and priorities. "I'll keep you posted," Mike promised. Sophia checked her watch. "I should get back to the office. Budget meeting at 1. She hesitated, then added, "The twins have been asking if Tyler might want to come over tonight. Apparently, he promised, to help them build some complicated Lego structure that's beyond my architectural capabilities." The invitation was casual, but Mike recognized it for what it was, another thread in the increasingly complex weave of their lives. "I'm sure he'd love to," Mike replied. "He mentioned something about it yesterday. I can drop him off around 6. "Perfect. And maybe you could stay for dinner," Sophia suggested. "No need to drive back and forth." "Sure," Mike agreed, perhaps too quickly. "I mean, if it's no trouble." "It never is," Sophia said softly, then seemed to catch herself. "I should go. See you tonight." As he watched her navigate back through the construction site, greeting workers by name as she passed, Mike was struck by how thoroughly she had integrated into his life in just a few months. From nemesis, the faceless banker threatening foreclosure, to employer, to friend, to something not yet named but increasingly undeniable. "You've got it bad, Reynolds," Anita commented, appearing at his elbow with uncanny timing. Mike didn't bother denying it. "That obvious? To everyone except apparently you two," she confirmed with a snort. "Now, can we get back to work? Or do you need a few minutes to stare wistfully after her?" Mike laughed, grateful for her blunt humor. "Let's call Rivera about that east wall." The workday passed in a blur of meetings, decisions, and the 1,000 small crises that constituted a major renovation project. By the time Mike headed home to clean up before dinner at Sophia's, his mind was so full of structural calculations and material specifications that he had little room to worry about the undefined nature of their relationship. Tyler, however, had no such distractions. "So, dinner at Ms. Winter's again," he observed casually as they drove through the early evening darkness, headlights illuminating swirling snowflakes. "That's what, the 3rd time this week?" Mike kept his eyes firmly on the road. "We're friends. Friends have dinner together." "Uh-huh," Tyler replied skeptically. "And friends look at each other the way you two do when you think no one's watching?" "I have no idea what you're talking about," Mike lied. Tyler sighed with the profound exasperation only teenagers can truly master. "Dad, it's been 3 months. You're over there all the time. She's always stopping by the project site. The twins basically consider me their honorary big brother. When are you going to admit there's something happening here?" Mike tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "It's complicated." "You always say that," Tyler pointed out, "but I don't think it is. I think you're scared." The direct accusation, delivered without malice but with perfect accuracy, landed like a physical blow. "I'm not Mike began automatically, then stopped himself. Okay, maybe I am. A little. Why? Tyler asked, his tone genuinely curious rather than confrontational. She obviously likes you. You definitely like her. The kids all get along. What's the problem? Put that way, it did sound simple, but the reality felt anything but. She's... Sophia is... Mike struggled to articulate the nebulous fears that had kept him from taking the next step. She's accomplished, educated, wealthy. I'm a mechanic who barely graduated high school and was on the verge of losing everything. Until a few months ago. So people from different worlds don't usually end up together except in movies, Mike explained, aware, even as he said it, how flimsy the excuse sounded. Tyler was quiet for a moment, considering. Mom left because she felt trapped by responsibility, right? By normal life, bills, raising a kid. The abrupt shift to Maria caught Mike off guard. That's what she said, yes. And you're worried Sophia might eventually feel the same way, bored by normal life with a regular guy? Sometimes Tyler's perception was downright unnerving. Maybe, Mike admitted, or that she'll wake up one day and realize this whole thing was just gratitude for saving the twins, or a charity project, or... Dad, Tyler interrupted firmly. That's dumb. Mike couldn't help but laugh at his son's blunt assessment. Thanks for the vote of confidence. I'm serious, Tyler insisted. Sophia's not Mom. And you're not the same person you were back then either. You're running a multi-million-dollar renovation project now. You talk about architectural styles and historical preservation like you've been doing it your whole life. That doesn't exactly put me in her league, Mike pointed out. Maybe she doesn't want someone in her league, Tyler suggested. Maybe she just wants someone who makes her laugh and treats her kids well and looks at her like she's the most interesting person in the world. Mike glanced at his son, struck once again by the wisdom that sometimes emerged from behind the typical teenage attitude. When did you get so smart about relationships? Tyler shrugged. Mrs. Patel's romance novels, plus, basic observation skills. They were approaching Sophia's neighborhood now, the houses growing larger and more elaborate. Holiday, lights twinkling through the snow. Mike slowed as they turned onto her street, the familiar journey both comforting and slightly surreal. How had this become routine? Dinner at the home of a woman who just months ago had been nothing more than a name on threatening letters from the bank. As they pulled into Sophia's driveway, the front door burst open and the twins tumbled. Out in matching winter coats, their faces alight with excitement. Tyler, Mr. Mike, Emma called, bouncing on her toes. We got the Super Mega Galaxy Lego set, the one with 1 billion pieces. Not 1 billion, Ethan corrected seriously. 1,897. I counted. Tyler laughed, already unbuckling his seatbelt. That's still a lot. We better get started right away. As the children raced back inside, Mike found himself facing Sophia in the doorway, a vision of casual elegance in a simple sweater and jeans, her hair loose around her shoulders. The sight of her, so at ease, so genuinely pleased to see them, made something twist pleasantly in his chest. You made it, she said, as though their arrival was a delightful surprise rather than a planned arrangement. Wild horses couldn't have kept Tyler away from a 1 billion-piece Lego set, Mike replied, stamping snow from his boots before entering. Not 1 billion, Sophia corrected with mock seriousness. 1,897. Ethan was very specific. So I heard, Mike laughed, the easy rapport between them feeling both natural and miraculous. Dinner was a relaxed affair, homemade pizza that the twins had helped prepare, complete with wildly uneven toppings and slightly burned edges. The conversation flowed easily from school projects to renovation challenges to local politics, punctuated by the children's enthusiastic interjections and occasional Lego-related negotiations. After the meal, Tyler and the twins disappeared to continue their construction project, leaving Mike and Sophia to clean up in companionable silence. The east wall problem is solved, Mike mentioned as he dried a plate she handed him. Rivera suggested a different approach, internal reinforcement rather than external. Saves about 12,000 and won't delay the timeline. Sophia nodded approvingly. I knew he'd have a solution. The man's a genius with old buildings. He also thinks we might be able to restore the original skylight in the atrium, Mike added, unable to hide his excitement. It was covered over in the 80s, but the structure is still sound. It would bring amazing natural light into the space. That sounds perfect, Sophia agreed, her eyes warming at his enthusiasm. This project really has become more than just a job for you, hasn't it? Mike considered this. I never expected to love it so much, he admitted. There's something incredibly satisfying about bringing an old building back to life, about honoring its history while giving it a new purpose. I felt the same way when I first saw it, Sophia said, like it was just waiting for someone to recognize its potential. She hesitated, then added softly, sometimes the most valuable things are the ones others have given up on. The simple statement hung between them, weighted with implications that extended far beyond historic preservation. Mike set down the dish towel, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, how intimate the kitchen felt with the children's voices, a distant murmur from upstairs. Sophia, he began, not entirely sure what he wanted to say, but feeling the need to say something. She turned to face him fully, her amber eyes holding his. Yes? The moment stretched, taut with possibility. Mike thought of all the reasons he'd been hesitating, the differences in their backgrounds, the professional complications, the fear of misreading signals. They suddenly seemed trivial compared to the look in her eyes. I've been thinking, he said carefully, about what this is. Between us. Sophia's expression remained open, though he detected a flicker of vulnerability beneath her composure. And what conclusions have you reached? That I'm overthinking it, Mike admitted with a rueful smile. That I've been looking for complications and obstacles instead of just seeing what's right in front of me. Which is? She prompted softly. Mike took a deep breath. Two people who somehow found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, who maybe fit together better than either of them expected. Something. In Sophia's face softened, relief and hope mingling in her expression. I was beginning to think you didn't feel it too, she confessed. The connection. I feel it, Mike assured her, surprised by the steadiness in his voice. I've just been too stubborn or scared to acknowledge it. Sophia smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that transformed her face. Stubborn I already knew about. It's one of your more endearing qualities, actually. Along with my remarkable ability to repair carburetors, Mike suggested, the lightness in his tone belying the significance of the moment. That too, Sophia agreed, taking a step closer. Though I'm particularly fond of your tendency to run into burning buildings to save children you've never met. Mike shook his head. One time, I do that one time and no one lets me forget it. Her laughter was soft, intimate. Some things are impossible to forget, Mike Reynolds. The distance between them had narrowed to inches, the conversation shifting into something wordless but equally clear. Mike reached out slowly, giving her time to step back if he'd misread the situation. Instead, Sophia moved forward, closing the remaining space between them. The kiss was gentle at first, a tentative exploration that quickly deepened as the months of unacknowledged attraction crystallized into this single moment. Sophia's hands came up to rest against his chest, and Mike's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer with a sense of rightness that defied rational explanation. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, Mike found himself staring into amber eyes that reflected his own mix of wonder and certainty. Well, Sophia said, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. That was worth waiting for. Mike laughed softly. Definitely. A crash from upstairs, followed by twin voices raised in alarm, and Tyler's reassuring response broke the moment. Sophia stepped back slightly, though her hand remained on Mike's arm. "We should probably check on that," Mike agreed, "though I'm guessing it's just Lego casualties." They headed upstairs together, finding the children surrounded by a complex Lego cityscape that had partially collapsed under its own ambitious architecture. "Structural integrity issues," Tyler explained seriously, though his knowing glance between Mike and Sophia suggested he'd noticed something different about them. "We built too high without proper support." "A rookie mistake," Mike replied, kneeling beside the construction zone. "Let me show you how to reinforce those towers." As they worked together, rebuilding the fallen Lego city, Mike was struck by the tableau they created. Himself and Sophia side by side, guiding the children through miniature engineering challenges. Tyler demonstrating big brother patience, the twins alternating between concentration and giggles. It looked remarkably like a family. The thought should have terrified him, should have triggered all his old fears about inadequacy and inevitable disappointment. Instead, it settled in his chest with surprising warmth and rightness. Later, as they prepared to leave, the twins extracted promises of next-day returns and Lego continuation. Tyler headed to the truck after saying his goodbyes, tactfully giving Mike and Sophia a moment alone in the entryway. "So," Mike began, suddenly awkward despite everything that had passed between them. "So," Sophia echoed, a smile playing at her lips. "About what happened in the kitchen. You mean when you finally made a move after 3 months of meaningful glances and careful distance?" Sophia teased gently. Mike laughed, relaxing. "Yeah, that. I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page." "And what page is that?" "The one where this isn't just gratitude or convenience or temporary insanity," Mike said honestly. "The one where we're actually starting something real." Sophia's expression softened. "I think we started something real the moment you ran into that burning building," she said quietly. "We've just been catching up to it ever since." The simple truth of her words resonated deeply. Mike reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I'm not sure where this goes from here," he admitted. "My experience with relationships is limited and complicated." "Mine too," Sophia assured him. "But I think that's normal. We're both bringing our histories and our children and our separate lives to this. We'll figure it out as we go." The practical approach, acknowledging complexity without being deterred by it, was so quintessentially Sophia that Mike couldn't help but smile. "One day at a time. One day at a time," she agreed, then rose on her toes to kiss him again, briefly but with unmistakable promise, "Starting with Saturday's party." "Right," Mike groaned. "I'd almost forgotten about that." Sophia laughed at his expression. "It'll be fine. Just a few friends, some investors. Nothing to worry about." "Says the woman who probably attends formal events regularly," Mike pointed out. "The last party, I went to featured keg stands and a very regrettable attempt at karaoke." "Now that sounds like a story I need to hear," Sophia said, her eyes dancing with amusement. "Save it for Saturday." "It's a date," Mike confirmed, the word feeling both significant and natural. As he drove Tyler home through the gently falling snow, Mike found himself in a state of calm certainty that contrasted sharply with his earlier anxieties. Nothing had been solved, really. The differences in their backgrounds remained. The complications of merging two families, two lives, two histories still loomed. But somehow, naming the connection between them, acknowledging its reality, had transformed those challenges from insurmountable obstacles to simply the next problems to solve together. "So," Tyler said, breaking the comfortable silence in the truck, "you finally told her." Mike glanced at his son, not bothering to feign ignorance. Yeah, or maybe she told me. It was mutual. Tyler nodded approvingly. About time. I was starting to think I'd have to lock you two in a room somewhere. Very funny, Mike replied dryly, though he couldn't muster any real annoyance. You're okay with this, with Sophia and me? Dad, Tyler said patiently. I've been okay with it since the beginning. The twins are great. Sophia makes you happy. What's not to be okay with? Put that way, it did seem simple. When did you get so wise? Must be all those romance novels, Tyler deadpanned. They drove in companionable silence for a while, the truck's headlights cutting through the falling snow, the familiar streets of Mapleton transformed into a winter wonderland. There is one thing, though, Tyler said eventually. If you and Sophia get married, does that mean she becomes our landlord? Because that could get awkward if you leave the toilet seat up. Mike laughed, the sound filling the cab of the truck. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. One day at a time, remember. But as they pulled into their driveway, the garage and apartment above it looking cozy and welcoming with the porch light shining through the snow, Mike allowed himself to imagine a future where these separate lives, his and Tyler's, Sophia's and the twins, might converge into something new and whole, where the fractured pieces left by Maria's departure and Daniel's death might reassemble into an unexpected mosaic. Beautiful not despite its breaks, but because of them. It was too soon to know if that future would materialize. Too soon for promises, or plans, or certainties. But for the first time in years, Mike Reynolds was looking forward rather than just getting through. And that, he decided as he followed his son into their modest home, was something worth celebrating, with or without exactly 7 mini marshmallows. Spring blossomed across Mapleton, painting the town in vibrant greens and delicate pinks. 1 year had passed since the night of the fire that had forever changed the trajectories of 2 families. The grand reopening of the Prescott building drew the entire community downtown. Red ribbons adorned the restored facade, and a small stage had been set up on the sidewalk for the ceremony. The transformation was breathtaking, from abandoned eyesore to restored landmark. The ground floor now housed a cafe, bookstore, and art gallery. Professional offices occupied the 2nd floor. The upper levels contained affordable apartments that had already been filled with deserving families. Mike stood slightly apart from the gathered crowd, overwhelmed by the culmination of months of work. The scars on his arms had faded to thin, silvery lines barely visible unless you knew to look for them. His life had undergone an even more remarkable transformation. "Ready for your speech?" Sophia asked, appearing beside him in a blue dress that matched the spring sky. "As ready as I'll ever be," Mike replied, tugging at his tie. Sophia reached up to straighten it, her amber eyes warm with pride. "You built this, Mike, not just supervised, truly built it." "We built it," he corrected, taking her hand in his. The simple diamond on her finger caught the sunlight, still new enough to surprise him when he noticed it. Emma and Ethan weaved through the crowd toward them, followed by Tyler, who had grown several inches over the past year and now stood eye to eye with Mike. "Dad, they're ready for you," Tyler announced. "Mr. Mike, can we come too?" Emma asked, bouncing on her toes. At 6, she had only grown more exuberant and determined. "Of course," Mike answered, scooping her up. "You're the most important part." Ethan slipped his hand into Sophia's, still the quieter twin, but now far more confident. "The mayor said I could cut the ribbon," he informed them with solemn pride. The ceremony unfolded with speeches from local officials praising the restoration's contribution to downtown revitalization. When Mike took the microphone, his nervousness faded as he found the words to describe not just the building's transformation, but his own. "A year ago, I was a mechanic struggling to keep my garage open," he said, his voice carrying across the attentive crowd. Today I'm standing here because one night changed everything. Not just the night I went into a burning building, but the night someone saw potential in me that I'd forgotten existed. His eyes found Sophia's in the audience. This building is a testament to second chances, to seeing value in things others had given up on, to finding beauty beneath years of neglect. After the ribbon cutting, Ethan performing his duty with precision while Emma cheered loudly, the crowd dispersed into the building for tours and refreshments. Mike found himself in the center of the grand atrium, surrounded by admiring comments about the restored skylight, the original tile work, the seamless marriage of historic details and modern functionality. "Mr. Reynolds," called a voice he didn't recognize. A well-dressed older man approached, hand extended. "Walter Preston, I've been following this project with interest." Mike shook his hand. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Preston. I own several historic properties in neighboring counties," Preston continued. "I've been looking for someone with your eye for restoration. Would you be interested in consulting on some potential projects?" Before Mike could respond, Joe Mendez appeared at his elbow, clapping him on the shoulder. "Don't let this guy undersell himself," Joe told Preston with a grin. "He just turned down an offer from a development firm in the city. Reynolds Restoration is becoming quite selective about its projects." Preston raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Is that so? Well, perhaps we should discuss terms over lunch next week." As Preston moved away, Mike turned to Joe with a bemused expression. "Reynolds Restoration? Since when?" "Since you printed business cards last month," Joe reminded him. "Embrace it, buddy. You found your calling." Later, as the celebration wound down, Mike found Sophia in the cafe, watching Tyler teach the twins how to make paper airplanes from the program booklets. "Walter Preston offered me a consulting job," he told her, sliding into the seat beside her. "I know," Sophia replied with a smile. "He asked me about you first." Mike laughed. "Of course he did. What did you tell him?" "That he'd be lucky to have you, that you see possibilities where others see problems." She took his hand, rubbing her thumb over the calluses that now came from restoration work rather than auto repair. "That you transformed more than just this building." Mike's throat tightened with emotion. He glanced across the table at their children, Tyler now talking about engineering school, Emma already planning her next adventure, Ethan quietly observing everything with thoughtful eyes, then back to Sophia, who had become his partner in every sense of the word. "You know what's amazing?" he said softly. "A year ago, I was terrified of losing my home. Now I've realized home isn't the garage or the apartment above it. It's this." He gestured to their makeshift family. "Us." Sophia leaned in, pressing her lips gently to his. "From foreclosure notices to forever," she murmured against his mouth. "Not the conventional route, but then again, we never did anything the conventional way," Mike finished with a smile. Outside, spring sunshine bathed the restored Prescott building in golden light, a symbol of renewal and second chances. Inside, surrounded by the family that fate and fire had brought together, Mike Reynolds embraced the most unexpected and perfect renovation of all, the one that had rebuilt his life from the ashes of what was into the promise of what could be. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.